Hey everybody, in this second episode of my Basal anchor series, we're going to be talking about more complex anchors. All of these anchors, just like the first series, are entirely lowerable. Unlike the first series, which are much more simple, these are going to be incorporating a little more complex methods for lowering a climber in an emergency. So let's get right to it. For this first anchor, I'm going to go onto the anchor side, that's the climb side, and I'm going to get some slack pulled out, and then I'm going to take this bite and I'm going to slide a anchor ring onto it, and then I'm going to pull it along. So now I have this double strand floating anchor ring. I'm going to now pass the bite around the tree. And next I'm going to take this bite and I'm going to once again pass it through the anchor ring. Okay. Once I've done that, I'm going to take a carabiner and I'm going to clip it to the bite. At this point, I'm going to cinch it down, and the next step is going to be to take this end here and I'm going to tie a slip knot on it. So I'm going to create a bite and then bring this through like that. So now I have this bite here. You could also tie a figure eight on a bite. And then I'm going to secure this strand here by clipping it to the carabiner. And now I have this double strand anchor. The final step is going to be to tie an Alpine Butterfly. You're going to want to do it higher than this, but I don't want to get it out of frame. You're going to tie an Alpine Butterfly above the anchor, and if you haven't seen the first episode in this Basal Anchor series, I encourage you to go check it out. I explain how you can rescue a climber by, with any Basal Anchor you use, if you put simply a Alpine Butterfly above the anchor, you can then connect a pulley in an emergency if a climber is injured and needs to be lowered, and then using a doubled or moving rope system, which you connect to your harness, you can lower them to the ground by first weighting the system and alleviating the tension on the anchor, then undoing the anchor, and then using this system to lower the climber to the ground. I explain in a little more detail in the first episode, so check it out if you don't understand what I'm saying. For this next complex system, I'm going to use a length of 11 millimeter Yale Bifrost, probably one of my favorite rope patterns. And on one end, I have a sonai. If you don't have a sonai, you can always just tie a locked bowline, like an Edwards or a Scott's locked or a Yosemite bowline. And on the other side, I have a aluminum anchor ring that has been tied with an anchor hitch, followed by 2 half hitches. I also have a GriGri, which is a rock climbing descender and belay device. Um, if you don't have the GriGri, This would only be good for recreational climbers. This would not be allowed for a industry climber. For an industry climber, you would need something like the Basal rig. It's a little expensive, but it's a great device if you want to have consistent lowerable basal anchors. You can always use it in a climbing system as well. So check out the Basal rig if you're an industry climber. But it works exactly the same way as this device. It's just a little bigger and a little stronger. So first, I'm going to take this end and I'm going to wrap it around the base of the tree. And then the next step is to take the sewn eye, or just the end of your rope, and pass it through the ring. At this point, you can cinch it down. Next step is going to be to simply open up your GriGri or rig and then install the rope. Okay, so I've installed the rope. Next, I'm going to connect this to, this would be the time that if you had just an end without an eye, you could tie just a lock bowline, or a figure of 8 on a bite would be good too. But I'm going to pass my carabiner through this eye, and then I'm going to install this device. It is a good idea to back this system up with a Alpine Butterfly below where the rope enters the descender, to ensure that if for some reason this were to fail, or if, another concern is that logs might fall if you're doing tree work and hit the device and knock it down the rope, move it physically along the rope. By putting this stopper knot here, you're going to prevent that from happening. To further back this up, you're going to take another carabiner, put it through the Alpine Butterfly, and then lock it to the rope. That makes sure that there's no way that this is going to run through the device when you don't want it to. In order to lower a climber, it's really easy. All you do is undo the carabiner, remove the carabiner from the Alpine Butterfly, undo the Alpine Butterfly, and then lift this handle up, and this will release the rope, and this end will drop with the climber. If you were to do this with the Basal rig, it would be the same exact way. So there's really no difference, except this device would be, changed with the rig. By the way, another option is to use a multi-center device, such as a rope wrench. Another option is to use a Rope Runner Pro. You could also potentially use something like a unisender or an akimbo as well. Just be sure that you lock them off the same way as I showed you with the GriGri and the rig. This next anchor is really cool. It's actually retrievable from the canopy by the climber. So let me show you how this works. So first, on the anchor side, you're going to want to use something like a bear paw or a rigging plate, where it's got some small holes and then a large connection hole. So you're going to thread this onto the rope, and then for the next step, I'm going to use this adjustable Basal anchor. It's got a prusik right in the, floating along the length of it, a 6-coil prusik with a large bite, and I tied this using just a double fisherman bend. And then on the other end, once again, I have an anchor ring connected with an anchor hitch and 2 half hitches. So I'm going to go around the tree. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the bite on the 6-coil prusik loop through the anchor ring. Okay, so I'm going to do it like that. Next, I'm going to take a carabiner and lock it in place. Now, to cinch this down, I have to slide the prusik up a little bit. And there you have it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rigging plate. This particular one is known as a bear paw because it kind of looks like a bear paw. And then I'm going to clip the main connection hole, the big one, to the carabiner. All right, make sure the gate is facing out. The next step is to tie an Alpine Butterfly on the underside of the bear paw or rigging plate. Great. Now that I've done that, the final step is to take a carabiner and I'm going to put it through the end of my rope. If you don't have a sewn loop or a splice, you can just tie a loop knot, and such as like a figure 8 on a bite or a secure bowline. What you're going to do is you're going to take this carabiner and connect it to the loop of the Alpine Butterfly. Now you're finished. And the way this works is the climber will ascend on this leg of the line and the rope will get jammed at the rigging plate because of the Alpine Butterfly. And when they're ready to retrieve the line, maybe they want to advance it somewhere else, or they want to tie a canopy anchor on a different tie-in point, and they need access to the rope without the anchor being attached, they can pull on this leg while they're up in the tree, and that will bring up this connection point, and all the climber then has to do is disconnect the carabiner, remove the carabiner, untie the Alpine Butterfly, and then they can pull the entire length of the rope out from this rigging plate or bear paw, and then they have the entire rope connected to nothing, ready to be used for any purpose they intend to use it for. Here's a really interesting basal anchor that probably not a lot of you have seen or heard of. This makes use of the same exact, primary anchor, the adjustable with the prusik and the ring, as the previous selection, but this makes use of the rope going around the tree above it in what's known as different pole angles, and you create the opposing pole angles here. It's very easy to do, which is why I'm not demonstrating it. You can just tell how to do it by looking at it, most likely. And then it's, anchored off with, are connected to the original anchor with a figure 8 on a bite and a carabiner. And don't forget your trusty Alpine Butterfly at the top for rescue with a double rope system that I showed in an earlier segment. But what this does is, if you're doing a lot of like limb walks, or if you're really doing a lot of cyclic loading, which means you're tensioning and untensioning the line repeatedly, this is going to allow the main anchor to stay cinched down as tight as you originally set it, and it's barely ever going to budge because all of the energy and forces is going to be going into these segments here. And this is really great. A good use for this type of anchor is if you have a tree that looks, if it has a trunk that, or a stem, whatever you want to call it, that looks like a hourglass. So if it's kind of like that, this will help prevent any movement of your anchor for any type of spar or stem or trunk, especially one that is shaped like an hourglass. This final basal anchor is a personal favorite of mine, and it makes use of a figure 8 descender. The first step is to take your separate anchor. It could be just a rope with a ring, or this one has a ring and a prusik. And I'm just going to bring this around the tree. And once I've done that, I just take this loop here and I pass it through the ring like that. Then I take a carabiner and I clip it to the loop. Then I'm just going to adjust this prusik so that it cinches down. And now I've got the primary part of the anchor. I didn't mention this in earlier segments, but when you use this type of basal anchor, this separate anchor that has a prusik, it's always a good idea to tie a stopper knot just below where the prusik is to ensure that if it were to slip or fail, it would only travel this small distance. So the next step is going to be to take the figure 8 descender, and I'm going to install a rope into it the way you would for anything like canyoning, or just the main way that people typically install ropes into these devices, which is to take a bite like this, pass it through the big hole, and then loop it around the bottom like that. Once I've done that, I'm going to block it using this strand here by simply taking the strand and crossing it over like that. Okay, you can see how it changed. It's now in a locked state. Then take your figure 8 descender and clip it to the carabiner. So now you've got the figure 8 installed. Before you climb on it though, you want to make it a little more secure. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a bight of rope and you're going to pass it through this carabiner, okay, like this. And then all you're going to do is tie 2 half hitches using this bight. So 1 and then 2. Lastly, take this bight and just for good measure, take a carabiner and clip it to the rope. That way you can be rest assured that this will not come undone. So in the event that you need to lower a climber in an emergency, what you're going to do is undo this carabiner, undo the 2 half hitches, and then you're going to pull that bight out from the carabiner. And now you have the carabiner in its still locked position. In order to lower a climber, you're going to have to take this strand here and put it back over to the opposite side. And as soon as you do that, you're going to be able to lower a climber, and you can control the descent by holding the rope like this, and it'll run through, at a speed relative to how much you feed into it at any given time. If you need to lock it off again, then you just take this strand, bring it over, and lock it the way I showed you originally. Another thing you can do is you can tie a friction hitch above the figure 8 and use either a double loop knot or a bear paw rigging plate and have this connected to one loop or hole, and on the other hole you can have this prusik right here, so that way if you lose control of the climber, the rope will get grabbed by the prusik right away. You can tie any friction hitch you want. All right, so this has been my episode on complex basal anchors. I hope you enjoyed it. Please hit that like button. Please hit subscribe. Question and comments. I love those. Check out my channel for more hitch how-tos, knot tutorials, and climbing videos. Bye.